taking up at text number 41. Every conditioned soul receives a different type of body according to his work, and when the engagement is finished, the body is finished. Although the spirit soul is situated in subtle and gross material bodies in different forms of life, he is not bound by them, for he is always understood to be completely different from the manifested body. Purport. Here it is very plainly explained that God is not responsible for the living entities accepting different types of bodies. One has to accept the body according to the laws of nature and one's own karma. Therefore, the Vedic injunction is that a person engaged in material activities should be given directions by which he can intelligently apply his activities to the service of the Lord to become free from the material bondage of repeated birth and death. Sokarmana tamabhyarcha siddhim vanditi manava. The Lord is always ready to give directions. Indeed, his directions are elaborately given in Bhagavad Gita. If we take advantage of these directions, then in spite of our being conditioned by the laws of material nature, we shall become free to attain our original constitution. Mameviye prapadyante mayametam tarantite. We should have firm faith that the Lord is supreme, and that if we surrender to him, thank you, he will take charge of us and indicate how we will get out of material life and return home back to Godhead. That's pretty fair. We should have firm faith that the Lord is superior, and that if we surrender to him, he will take charge of us and indicate how we can get out of material life and return home back to Godhead. That's the answer to all questions. If anybody asks you anything, just answer with this. Without such surrender, one is obliged to accept a certain type of body according to his karma, sometimes as an animal, sometimes as a demigod, and so on. Although the body is obtained and lost in due course of time, the spirit soul does not actually mix with the body, but is subjugated by the particular modes of nature with which he is sinfully associated. Spiritual education changes one's consciousness so that one simply carries out the orders of the Supreme Lord and becomes free from the influence of the modes of material nature. 42. Just as a householder, although different from the identity of his house, thinks his house to be identical with him, so the conditioned soul, due to ignorance, accepts the body to be himself, although the body is actually different from the soul. This body is obtained through a combination of portions of earth, water, and fire, and when the earth, water, and fire are transformed in the course of time, the body is vanquished. The soul has nothing to do with this creation and dissolution of the body. Purport, we transmigrate from one body to another in bodies that are products of our illusion, but as spirit souls, we always exist separately from material conditional life. The example given here is that a house or car is always different from its owner, but because of attachment, the conditioned soul thinks it to be identical with him. A car or house is actually made of material elements. As long as the material elements combine together properly, the car or house exists. And when they are disassembled, the house or car is disassembled. The spirit soul, however, always remains as he is. Is there such a word as dissembled? What? Yeah, it has a different meaning. There's a word dissembled. Now you know there he is. You hold on now. Dissembled. Dissembled. To hide under a false appearance. To hide under a false appearance, dissembling the facts. What did you use? Dissemble marathon. To put on the appearance of, simulate. She lay down and dissembled sleep. That's very interesting. It's to hide under a false appearance, dissembler. Origin. dissemblant in Middle English, alteration of dissimulant from Middle French, dissimulare from Latin, dissimulare from dissimulate, dissimulare, dissimulate, to hide under a false appearance, dissemble. I like that word very much. I'm extremely enlivened by that word. Disassembled. The spirit soul, but not to be confused with disassembled. The spirit soul, however, always remains as he is. Text number 43. As fire, although situated in wood, is perceived to be different from the wood, as air, although situated within the mouth and nostrils, is perceived to be separate, and as the sky, although all-pervading, never mixes with anything, so the living entity, although now encaged within the material body, of which it is the source, is separate from it. Very helpful. In Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has explained that the material energy and spiritual energy both emanate from Him. The material energy is described as me, na, prakritirashtadha, the 8 separated energies of the Lord. But although the 8 gross and subtle material energies, namely earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, are stated to be bina, separate from the Lord, actually they are not. As fire appears separate from wood, and as the air flowing through the nostrils and mouth of the body appears separate from the body, so the Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appears separate from the living entity, but is actually separate and not separate simultaneously. This is the philosophy of Achintya Bheda Bhedatattva propounded by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. According to the reactions of karma, the living entity appears separate from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but actually he is very intimately related with the Lord. Is in a dissembled state of separation. Consequently, even though we now seem neglected by the Lord, He is actually always alert to our activities. Under all circumstances, therefore, we should simply depend on the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus revive our intimate relationship with Him. We must depend upon the authority and control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 44. Yamaraj continued, O lamenters, you are all fools. The person named Suyagya, for whom you lament, is still lying before you and has not gone anywhere. Then what is the cause for your lamentation? Previously he heard you and replied to you, but now, not finding him, you are lamenting. This is contradictory behavior, for you have never actually seen the person within the body who heard you and replied. There is no need for your lamentation, for the body you have always seen is lying here. Purport: this instruction by Yamaraj in the form of a boy is understandable even for a common man. A common man who considers the body the self is certainly comparable to an animal. Yasya mabudhi kunapetradakte saeva gokara. But even a common man can understand that after death a person is gone. Although the body is still there, a dead man's relatives lament that the person has gone away, for a common man sees the body but cannot see the soul. As described in Bhagavad Gita, Dehinosmin yatha dehe, the soul, the proprietor of the body, is within. After death, when the breath within the nostrils has stopped, one can understand that the person within the body, who was hearing and replying, has now gone. Therefore, in effect, the common man concludes that actually the spirit soul was different from the body and has now gone away. Thus, even a common man coming to his senses can know that the real person who was within the body and was hearing and replying was never seen. For that which was never seen, what is the need of lamentation? 45. In the body, the most important substance is the life air. Is that bug zappers turned on there, Mahindra? Can you check? It's not? OMG. They're circling like... Oh. All right. We'll just leave it the way it was. It'll come back on. In the body, the most important substance is the life air, but that also is neither the listener nor the speaker. Beyond even the life air, the soul also can do nothing, for the supersoul is actually the director in cooperation with the individual soul. The supersoul, conducting the activities of the body, is different from the body and living force. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead distinctly says in Bhagavad Gita 15:15, Sarvasya chaham hridashandivishto mataksmitir jnanam apohanam cha. I am seated in everyone's heart, and for me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Although the Atma, or soul, is present in every material body, dehinosmin yatha dehe, he is not actually the chief person acting through the senses, mind, and so on. The soul can merely act in cooperation with the supersoul because it is the supersoul who gives him directions to act or not act. Mataksmitir jnanam apohanam cha. One cannot act without his sanction, for the supersoul is upadrashta and anumanta, the witness and sanctioner. One who studies carefully under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master can understand the real knowledge that the Supreme Personality of God is actually the conductor of all the activities of the individual soul and the controller of their results as well. Although the individual soul possesses the indriyas or senses, he is not actually the proprietor, for the proprietor is the supersoul. Consequently, the supersoul is called Hrishikesha, and the individual soul is advised by the direction of the supersoul to surrender to him and thus be happy. Sarvadharman parityaja mamekam sharanam braja. Thus, he can become immortal and be transferred to the spiritual kingdom, where he will achieve the highest success of an eternal blissful life of knowledge. In conclusion, the individual soul is different from the body, senses, living force, and the airs within the body, and above him is the supersoul, who gives the individual soul all facilities. The individual soul, who renders everything to the supersoul, lives very happily within the body.
Text 46. The 5 material elements, the 10 senses, and the mind all combine to form the various parts of the gross and subtle bodies. The living entity comes in contact with his material bodies, whether high or low, and later gives them up by his personal prowess. This strength can be perceived in living entities' personal power to possess different types of bodies. This strength can be perceived in a living entity's personal power to possess different types of bodies. Purport. The conditioned soul has knowledge, and if he wants to fully utilize the gross and subtle bodies for his real advancement in life, he can do so. It is therefore said here that by his high intelligence, Swena Tejasa, by the superior power of superior knowledge achieved from the right source, the spiritual master or acharya, he can give up his conditional life in a material body and return home back to Godhead. However, if he wants to keep himself in the darkness of this material world, he can do so. The Lord confirms this as follows in Bhagavad Gita. Yanti deva vita devan pratinyanti prativita bhutani yanti bhuteja yanti maryajinopimam. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. Those who worship ancestors go to the ancestors, and those who worship me will live with me. The human body, the human form of body is valuable. One can use this body to go to the higher planetary systems, to to Pitriloka, or he can remain in this lower planetary system. But if one tries, he can also return home, back to Godhead. This prowess is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the Supersoul. Therefore the Lord says, Mattak smritir jnanam apohanam cha. From me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. If one wants to receive real knowledge from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can become free from bondage to repeated acceptance of material bodies. If one takes to the devotional service of the Lord and surrenders unto Him, the Lord is prepared to give one directions by which to return home, back to Godhead. But if one foolishly wants to keep himself in darkness, he can continue in a life of material existence. 47. As long as the spirit soul is covered by the subtle body, consisting of the mind, intelligence, and false ego, he is bound to the results of his fruitive activities. Because of this covering, the spirit soul is connected with the material energy and must accordingly suffer material conditions and reversals continually, life after life. Purport. The living entity is bound by the subtle body, consisting of the mind, intelligence, and false ego. At the time of death, therefore, the position of the mind becomes the cause for the next body. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Yam yam bhapi smaran bhavam tyajajanti kalevaram. At the time of death, the mind sets the criteria for the spirit souls being carried to another type of body. If a living being resists the dictation of the mind and engages the mind in the loving service of the Lord, the mind cannot degrade him. The duty of all human beings, therefore, is to keep the mind always engaged at the lotus feet of the Lord. Savai mana Krishna padada vindayo. When the mind is engaged at the lotus feet of the Lord of Krishna, the intelligence is purified, and then the intelligence gets inspiration from the Supersoul, Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. Thus, the living entity makes progress toward liberation from material bondage. The individual living soul is subject to the laws of fruitive activity, but the Supersoul, Paramatma, is not affected by the fruitive activities of the individual soul. As confirmed in the Vedic Upanishad, the Paramatma and the Jivatma, who were likened to two birds, are sitting in the body. The Jivatma is enjoying the suffering by eating the fruits of the bodily activities. But the Paramatma, who is free from such bondage, witnesses and sanctions the activities of the individual soul as the individual soul desires. Text 48. It is fruitless to see and talk of the material modes of nature and the resultant so-called happiness and distress if they were factual. This is like poetic justice. They're lamenting over and the little kid comes and says all these really heavy things to him, you know. I mean, it's pretty dramatic. When the mind wanders during the day and a man begins to think himself extremely important, or when he dreams at night and sees a beautiful woman enjoying with him, these are merely false dreams. Similarly, the happiness and distress caused by the material senses should be understood to be meaningless. Understood to be what? Meaningless. Oh, I get it. Purport. The happiness and distress derived from the activities of the material senses are not actual happiness and distress. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita speaks of happiness that is transcendental to the material conception of life. Sukham atyantikam yattad buddhigraya matindriyam. When our senses are purified of material contamination, they become atindriya, transcendental senses. And when the transcendental senses are engaged in the service of the master of the senses, Rishikesha, one can derive real transcendental pleasure. Whatever distress or happiness we manufacture by mental concoction through the subtle mind has no reality, but is simply a mental concoction. One should therefore not imagine so-called happiness through mental concoction. Rather, the best course is to engage the mind in the service of the Lord, Rishikesha, and thus feel real blissful life. There is a Vedic statement, Apama somam amrita abhuma asura bir biharama. With reference to such a conception, one wants to go to heavenly planets to enjoy with the young girls there and drink somarasa. Such imaginary pleasure, however, has no value. As confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, Antavat tupadam tesham tadbhavat yalpamedasam. Men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Even if by fruitive activity or worship of the demigods one is elevated to the higher planetary systems for sense enjoyment, his situation is condemned in Bhagavad Gita as antavat, perishable. The happiness one enjoys in this way is like the pleasure of embracing a young woman in a dream. For some time it may be pleasing, but actually the basic principle is false. The mental concoction of happiness and distress in this material world are compared to dreams because of their falseness. All thoughts of obtaining happiness by using the material senses have a false background and therefore have no meaning. 49. Kind of like a cold bucket of water over the head. Those who have full knowledge of self-realization, who know very well that the spirit soul is eternal, whereas the body is perishable, are not overwhelmed by lamentation. But persons who lack knowledge of self-realization certainly lament. Therefore it is difficult to educate a person in illusion. Purport. According to the Mimamsa philosophers, everything is eternal, nitya, and according to the Sankhya philosophers, everything is mitya, or anitya, impermanent. Nonetheless, without real knowledge of Atma, the soul, such philosophers must be bewildered and must continue to lament as Shudras. Srila Shukadeva Goswami therefore said to Parikshit Maharaj, Shruttavyadi nirajendra nrinam santi sahasrashaha apashtatam atmatatvam griheshu grihamedinam griheshu grihamedinam griheshu grihamedinam. Those who are materially engrossed, being blind to knowledge of the ultimate truth, have many subjects for hearing in human society. O Emperor, for ordinary persons engaged in material activities, there are many, many subject matters to understand, because such persons do not understand self-realization. One must therefore be educated in self-realization, so that under any circumstances in life he will remain steady in his vows. Consistency. 50. What? There was once a hunter. Let you.
Go ahead on. Go ahead on. 40.
There was once a hunter who lured birds with. I gotta say that again. Sorry, I'm so embarrassed with our expert. Parivid over there is going like, oh, look, did you hear that? My God, this guy he's got the foggiest idea what he's doing. There was once a hunter who lured birds with food and captured them after spreading a net. He lived as if appointed by death personified, as the killer of the birds. Purport. This is another incident from the histories.
"51. While wandering in the forest, the hunter saw a pair of kulinga birds. Of the two, the female was captivated by the hunter's lure. O queens of Suyagya, the male kulinga bird, seeing his wife put into the greatest danger in the grip of providence, became very unhappy. Because of affection, the poor bird, being unable to release her, began to lament for his wife. Alas, how merciless is providence! My wife, unable to be helped by anyone, is in such an awkward position and lamenting for me. What will providence gain by taking away this poor bird? What will be the profit? If unkind providence takes away my wife, who is half of my body, why should he not take me also? What is the use of my living with half of my body, bereaved by loss of my wife? What shall I gain in this way? 55. The unfortunate baby birds, bereft of their mother, are waiting in the nest for her to feed them. They are still very small and have not yet grown their wings. How shall I be able to maintain them? This is the antidote to the Bharat Maharaj conundrum. Purport. The bird is lamenting for the mother of his children because the mother naturally maintains and cares for the children. Yamaraj, however, in the guise of a small boy, has already explained that although his mother left him uncared for and wandering in the forest, the tigers and other ferocious animals had not eaten him. The real fact is that if the Supreme Personality of Godhead protects one, even though one be motherless and fatherless, one can be maintained by the goodwill of the Lord. Otherwise, if the Supreme Lord does not give one protection, one must suffer in spite of the presence of his father and mother. Another example is that sometimes a patient dies in spite of a good physician and good medicine. Thus, without the protection of the Lord, one cannot live, with or without parents. Another point in this verse is that fathers and mothers have protective feelings for their children, even in bird and beast society, not to speak of human society. In Kali Yuga, however, is so degraded that a father and mother even kill their children in the womb on the plea of their scientific knowledge that within the womb the child has no life. Prestigious medical practitioners give this opinion, and therefore the father and mother of this day kill their children within the womb. How degraded human society has become! Their scientific knowledge is so advanced that they think that within the egg and the embryo there is no life. Now these so-called scientists are receiving Nobel Prizes for advancing the theory of chemical evolution. But if chemical combinations are the source of life, why don't the scientists manufacture something like an egg through chemistry and put it in an incubator so that a chicken will come out? What is their answer? With their scientific knowledge, they are unable to create even an egg. Such scientists are described in Bhagavad Gita as Maya Pritigyana, fools whose real knowledge has been taken away. They are not men of knowledge, but they pose as scientists and philosophers, although their so-called theoretical knowledge cannot produce practical results.
Text 56. Because of the loss of his wife, the Kalinga bird lamented with tears in his eyes. Meanwhile, following the dictations of mature time, the hunter, who was very carefully hidden in the distance, released his arrow, which pierced the body of the Kalinga bird and killed him. Text 57. Thus Yamaraj, in the guise of a small boy, told all the queens, "You are all so foolish that you lament, but do not see your own death. Afflicted by a poor fund of knowledge, you do not know that even if you lament for your dead husband for hundreds of years, you will never get him back alive. And in the meantime, your lives will be finished." Purport. Yamaraj once asked Maharaj Yudhishthira, "What is the most wonderful thing within this world?" Maharaj Yudhishthira replied, Ahanyahani bhutani gachanti ha yamayanam shesha stavaramachanti kimascharya matakparam kimascharya matakparam kinascharya matakparam. Hundreds and thousands of living entities meet death at every moment. But a foolish living being nonetheless thinks himself deathless and does not prepare for death. This is the most wonderful thing in the world. Everyone has to die because everyone is fully under the control of material nature. Yet everyone thinks that he is independent, that whatever he likes, he can do, that he will never meet death, but will live forever, and so on. So-called scientists are making various plans by which living entities in the future can live forever, but while they are thus pursuing such scientific knowledge, Yamaraj, in the course of time, will take them away from their business of so-called research.
How come it's hard to hear? Sometimes it's loud and sometimes it's not.
Hello?
There now it sounds okay.
Hello?
It's a little better.
Hello? 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 Text 58. Hiranyakashipu said, while Yamaraj, in the form of a small boy, was instructing all the relatives surrounding the dead body of Sudyagya, everyone was struck with wonder by his philosophical words. They could understand that everything material is temporary, not continuing to exist. Purport. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Antavanta ime deha nityasyukta sharirina. The body is perishable, but the soul within the body is imperishable. Therefore the duty of those advanced in knowledge in human society is to study the constitutional position of the imperishable soul and not waste the valuable time of human life by merely maintaining the body and not considering life's real responsibility. Every human being should try to understand how the spirit soul can be happy and where he can attain an eternal blissful life of knowledge. Human beings are meant to study these subject matters, not to be absorbed in caring for the temporary body, which is sure to change. No one knows whether he will receive a human body again. There is no guarantee, for according to one's work, one may get any body, from that of a demigod to that of a dog. In this regard, Srila Madhvacharya comments, Aham mamami manandi twat yatotam anityadam mahadhadi yatotam cha nitya chapi yatotita nitya chapi yatotita nitya chapi yatotita. Oh, asvatant. I didn't see the second one. Avatan traiva prakriti swatantro nitya eva cha yatartha bhutas chapara eka eva janardana eka eva janardana eka eva janardana. Only Janardan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is ever existing, but his creation, the material world, is temporary. Therefore, everyone who is captivated by the material energy and absorbed in thinking, I am this body, and everything belonging to this body is mine, is an illusion. One should think only of being eternally a part of Janardana. And one's endeavor in this material world, especially in this human form of life, should be to attain the association of Janardana by going back home, back to Godhead. Eka eva Janardana, even Janardana. 59. After instructing all the foolish relatives of Sudyagya, Yamaraj, in the form of a boy, disappeared from their vision. Then the relatives of King Sudyagya performed the ritualistic funeral ceremonies. Text 60. Therefore none of you should be aggrieved for the loss of the body. whether your own or those of others. Only in ignorance does one make bodily distinctions, thinking, who am I? Who are the others? What is mine? What is for others? Purport. In this material world, the conception of self-preservation is the first law of nature. According to this conception, one should be interested in his personal safety and should then consider society and should then consider society, friendship, love, nationality, community, and so on, which have all developed because of the bodily conception of life and a lack of knowledge of the spirit soul. This is called ajnana. As long as human society is in darkness and ignorance, men will continue to make huge arrangements in the bodily conception of life. This is described by Prahlad Maharaj as Brahma. In the materialistic conception, modern civilization makes enormous arrangements for huge roads, houses, mills, and factories, and this is man's conception of the advancement of civilization. People do not know, however, that at any time they themselves may be kicked out of the scene and forced to accept bodies that have nothing to do with these enormous homes, palaces, roads, and automobiles. Therefore, when Arjuna was thinking in terms of his bodily relationships with his kinsmen, Krishna immediately chastised him, saying, Kutastva kashmalamidam vishame samapashtinam anarya jushtam. This bodily conception of life is befitting the anaryas, the non-Aryans, who were not advanced in knowledge. An Aryan civilization is a civilization advanced in spiritual knowledge. Not merely by stamping oneself an Aryan does one become an Aryan. To keep oneself in the deepest, darkest darkness, considering spiritual knowledge, and at the same time claim to be an Aryan, is a non-Aryan position. In this connection, Srila Madhvacharya quotes as follows from the Brahma Bharata Purana. Ka atma kak pariti dehadhyapekshaya nahi dehadir atmasyan nachashatrur udirita ato dait hikit vidauva. Chayeva kim prajojanam yastude hagato jivak nahinasham nagachchati tatak shatru bidau cha swanashe shochanam kuta. My God. Ata atma vividishtu vasudeve ratistira shatruna shastata jnana nasho nanyak katachana nasho nanyak katachana nanyak katachana. The purport is that as long as we are in this human form of body, our duty is to understand the soul within the body. The body is not the self. We are different from the body, and therefore there is no question of friends, enemies, or responsibilities in terms of the bodily conception of life. One should not be very anxious about the body's changing from childhood to boyhood, from boyhood to old age, and then to apparent annihilation. Rather, one should be very seriously concerned about the soul within the body and how to release the soul from the material clutches. Living entity within the body is never annihilated. Therefore, one should surely know that whether one has many friends or many enemies, his friends cannot help him, and his enemies cannot do him any harm. Yeah. One should know the living entity within the body is never annihilated. Therefore, one should surely know that whether one has many friends or many enemies, his friends cannot help him, and his enemies can do him no harm. One should know that he is a spirit soul, Aham Brahmasmi, and that the constitutional position of the soul is unaffected by the changes of the body. In all circumstances, everyone as a spirit soul must be a devotee of Lord Vishnu and should not be concerned with bodily relationships, whether with friends or with enemies. One should know that neither we ourselves nor our enemies in the bodily concept of life are ever killed. You got that right.
Sri Narada Muni continued, Diti, the mother of Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, heard the instructions of Hiranyakashipu along with her daughter-in-law, Rushabhanu, Hiranyaksha's wife. I wonder what she's like. Hi, I'm Hiranyaksha's wife, Rushabhanu. She then forgot her grief over her son's death and thus engaged her mind and attention in understanding the real philosophy of life. There you go. Purport: when a relative dies, one certainly becomes very much interested in philosophy. But when the funeral ceremony is over, one again becomes attentive to materialism. Can we help you? Anything we can do for you here? What would you like to do? There's a power outlet down there if you'd like. Okay, we're going to play games. Even Daitas, who are materialistic persons, sometimes think of philosophy when some relative meets death. The technical term for this attitude of the materialistic person is shmashana vairagya, or detachment in a cemetery or place of cremation. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, 4 classes of men receive an understanding of spiritual life and God. Arto, the distressed; Jignasu, the inquisitive; Artarti, one who desires material gains; and Jnani, one who is searching for knowledge. Especially when one is very much distressed by material conditions, one becomes interested in God. Therefore Kunti Devi said in her prayers to Krishna that she preferred distress to a happy mood of life. In the material world, one who is happy forgets Krishna or God, but sometimes, if one is actually pious but in distress, he remembers Krishna. Queen Kunti Devi therefore preferred distress because it is an opportunity for remembering Krishna. When Krishna was leaving Kunti Devi for his own country, Kunti Devi regretfully said that she was better off in distress because Krishna was always present, whereas now that the Pandavas were situated in their kingdom, Krishna was going away. For a devotee, distress is an opportunity to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead constantly. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 7th canto, 2nd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Hiranyakashipu, King of the Demons. Bravo! Bravissimo! Sadhu! Reflections? No questions, just reflections. Go right ahead.
It's very interesting that Hiranyakashipu speaks all this philosophy about, losing someone who shouldn't be affected, and then he wants to kill Vishnu. Just like Kamsa, he felt some, lamentation. Look how honest Vasudeva is. Take your kid away. And says, wait a minute, no, I can't take any chances. So demons, unfortunately, their smashana vairagya is very short-lived. No.
Smashana vairagis. Back to the
ministers of Kamsa to kill all the children. They also suggested to kill the cows and brahmanas. If you kill the brahmanas of Lord, the same. In the first part, what I heard, Jai Vijay, and at the center are two children with two arms. Wondering why they would think I thought it was a little odd.
I know.
Yada. One of these days, Alice, to the moon, Alice. I heard Gopi Pranadana Prabhu answer this question very nicely. And this is coming from one of our acharyas. I don't remember which acharya it is. But Jai and Vijay were prompted by the Lord because they understood the mind of the Lord. They're very intimate servants, actually. They're actually the doorkeepers of one of the last door. Intimate. There's 7 all around and 28 doors, and they're like on the auspicious side and the last door. And they understood the mind of the Lord, that He wanted to play, He wanted to support, and they wanted to be able to serve Him in that way. So they imposed this upon themselves, this desire. And then the goddess of fortune came, and she was going out. I don't remember what she was doing, but she came through the gate, and they did or said something to her that made an offense. And that was an arrangement by the Lord to satisfy that desire of theirs, to satisfy His desire. And then when the 4 Kumaras came in, then they were able to do that.
There you have it. Sugiva Anatta. It was for you, Nagar.
Oh, no, I was just poised to grab.
Poised only. Other reflections? What things did you heard that stuck? I always appreciate the Kalinga bird story. It's told 2 more times in the Bhagavatam, but it's just so. Kalinga birds are so cute, little baby birds, and everyone gets shot to smithereens, and murdered in the nest, and it's just such a clear indication that we shouldn't become enamored of the external energy. You go to Japan, everything's cute. That's their theme there. Everything's got to look cute. And it's another kind of Maya that, like, Hello Kitty, and, everything's got a little smiley face. And the material energy, meanwhile, is rolling through, just crushing everybody, while everyone's absorbed in the cuteness of it all. So there's kind of a sobering mood to that whole thing. That's why I said it's an antidote to the conundrum of Bharat Maharaj, because, what about the little fawn? It's like, okay, you can't save it anyway, if you try to. And somebody has to have that conviction within to not become caught up. Prabhu.
I was just appreciating that we have been reading now like 5, 6, 7 canto, and it's a theme throughout that. It's actually explained that where the acharyas describe the Bhagavatam is that literature which arises a sense of renunciation of the material world, and just find the pastime. Every pastime is like bringing up the same point. That material life is pointless, and go back, serve Krishna. And it's just nice, like I have heard from Kesava Maharaj many times, that we have to study all of, read Prabhupada's books as the whole thing, to get the message. And now that we're reading solidly for so many days, and the same message has been repeatedly kind of emphasized, it's kind of having a different effect on my consciousness. And I'm really feeling the power, of reading Prabhupada's books, particularly Srimad Bhagavatam. The
It's a real
Vaisesika, the
download.
Govardhan. Yeah.
Nagar? Okay.
Yeah, I would like to just elaborate a little bit on that point.
You hold that a little closer somehow.
I can't help it. I was born like this. What can I do, you know? Yeah. If you hear this and don't like to hear it, even if you've heard it over and 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 over, you're still attached to your body. If you hear something that's true and you don't like to hear it, there's a problem. So therefore the Bhagavatam just forces you to hear it again and again and again and again and again until you like to hear it. Then you're on your way home.
Last point.
I was appreciating how much Shukadeva Goswami and Narada Muni were making the point of the necessity for getting absorbed in attachment to Krishna somehow or other, and just see if him having that nature that anyone who's attracted to him gets purified. So the real disease is the indifference. So I was just thinking, you know, I really have to get attached to Krishna. Do I see a connection between the repeated theme that we're not the body and what I just said? Well, yeah, we're not the body is the negative, and then the attachment to Krishna is the positive. Also, or is detachment from the body and attachment to Krishna the same or similar? Well, in our line it is. In terms, I was just more thinking about that attachment to Krishna, but of course that's part of it. You can't be attached without being detached from the body. But it just made me motivated. Somehow or other get close, get attached.
Reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam. We'll take it up again tomorrow at 10:45. Thanks for joining us from online. Thanks for everybody in the studio audience. Go Premanande Nitai Gaura Hari Bo Hari Bo Nitai Gaura Hari Bo Nitai Gaura Hari Bo Hari Bo Nitai Gaura Hari Bo Vanchakalpadrvishya Kripasnabeva Patitaram Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. What? Say what? 122. 123.